Hey all you cool cats and kittens, Azim here. We're going to go over a few anatomy models to look at different endocrine organs and talk about the hormones that they produce. So what is an endocrine organ? It's an organ that produces and releases hormones. What are hormones? Hormones are chemicals that are released into the bloodstream and have some control over them. So the endocrine system is a control system much like the nervous system. It just uses only chemicals through the bloodstream. Now, there are a lot of different endocrine organs. Like, for instance, organs that you might not think of as endocrine. The heart, for instance, of course, is a cardiovascular organ, but the heart does produce and release hormones. The stomach, too. It's a digestive organ, but it also produces and releases hormones. We're not going to focus on those ones. We're going to focus on some of the more what's considered major endocrine organs and the hormones that they produce. So let's start with the brain region. So the brain, of course, is nervous tissue, but there are particular areas of the brain that do produce and release hormone. First, look at this light bump here. It's behind the thalamus. This light bump here is the pineal gland. You can also see it on this model here. Here's the nose, so this is anterior. In pink, there's a pineal gland. The pineal gland is a gland that produces melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that is great for regulating your circadian rhythms, rhythms that last roughly a day. So the most obvious one is a sleep-wake cycle. So you might see melatonin over the counter to help with, it has a sleep aid, which at least works for me. So yeah, that's a pineal gland. Pineal gland, thalamus is not endocrine, but that's the thalamus. Below the thalamus, this is an endocrine, well, it's part of the endocrine system. It's neuroendocrine. This is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is made of neurons, so it's not true endocrine tissue, but it does produce hormone. The hypothalamus produces hormones that are released to the anterior pituitary. So here in pink, the whole thing is the pituitary, but really there are two parts. There's an anterior portion and a posterior portion. The hypothalamus releases, quote unquote, releasing hormones to the anterior pituitary. Releasing hormones are hormones like growth hormone releasing hormone, corticotropin releasing hormone, thyrotropin releasing hormone, all these releasing hormones that tell the anterior pituitary to release even more hormone, which we'll get to in a minute. So the anterior pituitary is true endocrine organ, true endocrine gland. The posterior pituitary is actually just an extension of the hypothalamus. So remember that stalk here, that's the infundibulum. There are neurons in the hypothalamus, their cell bodies are here, their axons extend down to the posterior pituitary and release hormone. The two hormones that I'd like you to know are antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Antidiuretic hormone, that literally means stopping urination, a hormone that stops urination. Antidiuretic hormone targets the kidneys, which I don't know if I have it. Yeah, I got it here. Targets the kidneys, and it tells the kidneys to absorb more water. If you absorb more water, that means you prevent further urination. So antidiuretic hormone helps you retain water. It's also called vasopressin, and what that means is you're increasing your blood pressure. So if you retain water, you also increase your blood pressure. So it does two different things. What we also have produced from the hypothalamus and released from the posterior pituitary is oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone that targets the smooth muscle of mammary glands. And so the ducts of mammary glands are lined with smooth muscle so that when you lactate, the milk gets pushed out. It's called a letdown reflex when oxytocin stimulates the smooth muscle here. Oxytocin also stimulates the smooth muscle of the uterus. This is a model of the female reproductive system. Here is, this would be the bladder, this is the vagina, and here's the uterus. So here's a smooth muscle. Oxytocin stimulates the smooth muscle for contractions. Those are only two functions of oxytocin. It actually does a bunch of other things, but those are two of the major ones. Stimulating smooth muscle for lactation and stimulating smooth muscle for contraction. The anterior pituitary, back to the pituitary here, which sits in that cella turcica of the sphenoid, the anterior pituitary produces and releases a bunch of different hormones. Let's start with Let's start with prolactin. So we mentioned how oxytocin is produced and released from the hypothalamus posterior pituitary. Prolactin is released from the anterior pituitary. Prolactin stimulates milk production in mammary glands. So to repeat those two different hormones, oxytocin stimulates release, prolactin stimulates production. Prolactin produces, oxytocin, you release the milk from mammary glands. So prolactin is one hormone from the anterior pituitary. Another hormone is called adrenocorticotropic hormone. Adrenocorticotropic. Adrenocorticotropic. Now, what does that mean? Adrenal, we're talking about the adrenal gland. Where's the adrenal gland? Find the kidneys. Adrenal is right here. Adrenal means, adrenal means on top of the kidney. Ad is on top, renal is kidney. So these are the adrenal glands. Their function is completely different than the kidneys. They're just on top of the kidneys. Adrenocortico, the term cortico is referring to the cortex. Cortex means, that was the kidney. Well, you can see how there's like a cortex of the kidney. Imagine I could do that here for the adrenal gland. I wish I had an adrenal gland model. I should put that on the list. But the outer portion of the adrenal gland, that's the adrenal cortex. Adrenocorticotropic, the tropic part means to stimulate growth, or just to stimulate in general. So we're stimulating the outer portion of the adrenal gland. That's what adrenocorticotropic hormone does. And again, that's produced and released by the anterior pituitary. We'll get to the adrenal gland more in a minute, but there are more hormones produced by the adrenal gland. The anterior pituitary also produces and releases what are collectively known as gonadotropins. Remember, tropin means growth. Gonads, we're talking about the ovaries and testes. Here's the penis, so here's the testes. In the male reproductive system, female reproductive system, here is one of the ovaries, uterine tubes to the uterus. So this is one of the ovaries. So gonadotropins are stimulated or released by the anterior pituitary. So our brain does regulate our reproduction. The two gonadotropins are luteinizing hormone, luteinizing, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone. Both of those names imply they're only for female reproductive system, because follicles and luteinizing, that has to do with female reproduction. But it does also stimulate the testes in males, in the male reproductive system. And we'll get to the hormones that are produced there in a minute. The anterior pituitary also produces, a thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. Thyroid stimulating hormone stimulates the thyroid. Where is the thyroid? Going down to the throat, the larynx. Here's that hyoid. Here's that thyroid cartilage. The thyroid is just, that's not it. The thyroid is just outside of, inferior to the thyroid cartilage and a bit lateral. This is the thyroid. So the thyroid is stimulated. The thyroid here in green is stimulated by thyroid stimulating hormone released from the anterior pituitary. And we'll get to more about the thyroid in a minute. One more hormone, I know a lot of hormones. One more hormone, the anterior pituitary also produces and releases growth hormone. Growth hormone, as the name implies, it helps with growth. So growth hormone released from the anterior pituitary can stimulate all the tissues of your body, but it can also stimulate the liver to release yet another hormone. The hormone that's produced by the liver is called insulin-like growth factors. Insulin-like growth factors. So the liver, while a digestive organ, is also an endocrine gland. All right, I said that the thyroid is stimulated by thyroid stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary. The thyroid itself releases two hormones, T3 and T4. We'll just call them thyroid hormones. They actually have really long names, thyroxine and triiodothyronine. Don't worry about it. Thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, are produced and released from the thyroid gland. They stimulate all over the body. They help increase metabolism. The thyroid is really interesting. There are completely different cells in the thyroid that don't produce T3 or T4. They produce a hormone called calcitonin. And calcitonin helps increase the amount of calcium in your blood. Calcitonin helps decrease the amount of calcium in your blood. Calcitonin helps remove calcium from your blood. So you could actually add calcium to your bones from the plasma into your bone tissue. Next organ and hormone that we'll go over is actually behind the thyroid gland. So you can't really see it here, but on this model, here you can see the anterior portion of the thyroid. If we cut out a piece of the thyroid so we can see behind, that's what these two dots are representing. These glands that are sitting on top of and kind of behind the thyroid are called parathyroid glands. Parathyroid hormone produced from these parathyroid glands, the parathyroid hormone helps you increase levels of calcium in your blood. So, for instance, it helps your digestive tract absorb more calcium from the food you eat. Parathyroid hormone comes from parathyroid gland. Back to the adrenal gland, I said that the adrenal cortex is stimulated by adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is released from the anterior pituitary, ACTH. ACTH stimulates the adrenal gland, and then the adrenal cortex produces and releases one of several different hormones. Found in zona reticularis, which is, I guess, the deepest part of the cortex, you produce and release androgens. Androgens are male sex hormones like testosterone and dihydrotestosterone, DHT. The middle layer of the adrenal cortex is called zona fasciculata, and that's where cortisol is released. Cortisol is your long-term stress hormone, like just getting ready for the day, waking up, cortisol levels should increase. If you have stress problems, then cortisol levels probably go up a lot, and that actually influences your immune system in a negative way. On the very, very outside of the cortex, it's called zona glomerulosa. You produce a hormone called aldosterone. Aldosterone is a hormone that stimulates your kidneys, that tells your kidneys to absorb more sodium. All right, we are moving on to the pancreas. Oh, sorry, one more thing about the adrenal gland. That was all of the adrenal cortex. The adrenal medulla, the center of the adrenal gland, that is also an endocrine gland. It produces epinephrine and norepinephrine, but it's also technically part of the nervous system because there are sympathetic neurons that extend from the spinal cord, preganglionic neurons that synapse here to the chromaffin cells, and then the neurons then cause the release of epinephrine. So the adrenal medulla is a modified sympathetic ganglion. If we remove, I guess we can see it at this angle, we can see here is the pancreas. The stomach would be sitting right here. We've obviously removed that, something like that. There we go. So here's the stomach. Posterior to the stomach, we have the pancreas. The pancreas is a digestive organ. It does produce digestive juices to the duodenum. That's separate, though. The pancreas is also an endocrine gland. It produces two different hormones. One is insulin, which helps decrease blood sugar. One's glucagon, which helps increase blood sugar. So both hormones are very necessary for regulating your blood glucose levels. Back to the ovaries. The ovaries of the female reproductive system, the hormone these produce, the cells in the ovaries produce, estrogens like estradiol. Estradiol is a specific form of estrogen, and progesterone, which is a type of progestin. So estrogens and progestins are produced by special cells in the ovary, in the follicles within the ovaries, and we'll take a look at that under a microscope. And in the testes, we have production of testosterone from Leydig cells. They're cells that are in the interstitial area, as well as dihydrotestosterone, DHT. Those collectively are known as androgens, testosterone and dihydrotestosterone. All right, a lot of different endocrine organs, a lot of different hormones. I hope I didn't speak too fast, but I guess this is YouTube and you can rewind it. All right, take care, stay safe.